CJ, welcome to Land Podcast. How's it going?
Good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
We've connected here pretty quickly, and we're able to line up our schedules to record an episode here today. And you have a lot going on, and I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation in two forms: your experience in real estate, and also some other things you have going on in your life that really excited to at least provide awareness and hopefully inspire a couple folks. But before we get into all of that, take a chance to introduce yourself, where you're from, and who you are.
Sure. So I'm CJ Garrett. I live in Northeast Kansas. I'm a real estate broker and developer and home builder, diehard bow hunter. And yeah, I love to hunt. I love my family and I love real estate. So it was an easy connection for us.
How'd you get into real estate?
So funny question. So I actually had a corporate job when I was young out of college. I worked really hard to kind of climb the corporate ladder, if you will. And at 21, 22 years old, I kind of hit a crossroads where I realized that it was a good living, wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do forever. Truthfully, I kind of ran into a situation where they kind of capped my pay based on my age. And that discouraged me a little bit. And I had a great mentor who was a real estate broker here locally. And I was at an event and sat down and had a conversation with him. And he was just like, look, you're young, you're ambitious. You don't have anything to lose. You're a great communicator, good, personable person. He said, why don't you just take a stab at real estate? And I was like, man, I don't know about that. I don't know anything. Long story short, just one thing led to another, and I decided to make the jump. So January 10th, 2010 was my first day as a real estate agent.
Interesting. Well, I mean, obviously the market was probably a little bit cool then, or no? Or were you guys still doing a lot of deals then?
I was so ignorant to real estate in the real estate market that I tell people this. When I walked into KCRER to register for my MLS fees and all my MLS dues, everybody else walking out, I didn't know it at the time, but they all looked like they'd been about beaten to death. And they were all going in there to turn their license, to put their license on referral or to just suspend their dues. And I didn't know. I was early 20s. I was going to be a real estate agent, And man, the first year I about starved to death. It was so hard. And then, from probably 2010 to 2012, it was really difficult times. Market was tough. We did a lot of fix flip type stuff. And that's really what made it through, honestly.
Was buying some of those soft market deals and fixing them, making them better and selling them?
Yeah, there was a lot of distressed properties at the time. There's a lot of REOs that were hitting the market. We realized that if you could buy the deal right, and ultimately people, if they had money, they were going to buy the best house in the neighborhood they wanted to be in. So we were just trying to put that product together for them.
Mm-hmm.
We did it. Not as many as we wanted to, but enough to survive.
That's sometimes that's what's most important. Do you think it was an advantage to go in kind of blind and everyone else is probably a little bit burnt out or sick of getting their butt kicked, where you're going in and you're like, man, I'm ready to go?
Maybe. Looking back, maybe. I tell people I'm like a hunter and gatherer by nature. That's, my personality type. So I didn't get discouraged how hard it was because I didn't know anyways. Right. So I just thought that was real estate. I didn't know any different. What's funny is now you fast forward 10 or 12 years and you look at relatively new agents that are in the market now and they're going, man, this is tough. And I just look at them. I'm like, you have no idea what tough is.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you started in 2010 and we talked previously, but it sounded like you were more in residential at that time as a residential listing and buyer's agent.
Yeah. So I did a lot of buyer seller, just representation stuff, the whole fix and flip type deal. I was always passionate about land, but being in real estate was a means to freedom so that I could hunt. I never really correlated that together. And then actually when my son was born, Grant, who we'll talk about later, that changed things for me because the demand was kind of picking up. That was 2015. I had built a bigger clientele. The calls that were incoming were more abundant than 2010, that's for sure, which was a blessing, but it almost got to be where it was hard to be at home and being a young dad for the first time with my wife who was young. I mean, there was a lot of new going on and it was very, very hard to manage all that. So I took a brief hiatus, went back to a corporate job thinking I needed stability. That didn't last. That's not who I am. I dove right back into it.
Interesting. Well, I think that's a fair point because I think a lot of folks from the outside looking in are like, oh man, being a real estate agent's awesome. You have a flexible schedule. Well, yeah, kind of, but most weekends and nights gone. And like, when are they available? Weekends and nights. And so that's something that is a pretty big misconception in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's a huge misconception because people think that you just work during the day and do what you want on the weekends and evenings. And really, if you look at real estate as a whole and everything that goes into it and everything that's required to keep your pipeline full and to really build a book of business, all the way from making connections, events, cold calling, everything that really you need to do to be successful. Well, you're not going to cold call somebody at 2:00 on a Tuesday because they're going to be working, right? So like your calls have to happen after hours, which more times than not, people don't want to talk to you after hours, right? So that's its own obstacle. So everything to start out is kind of in those evenings and weekend type positions.
Yeah, for sure. And so you were in corporate America and then you said, okay, this isn't for me. And then, so did you transition back into real estate on a different strategy, or what was that next transition?
I came back, I just said, I'm going to get back into it, but I'm going to find a way to change it. The thing that changed my whole perspective is I met a guy who's a big developer up in Missouri, in the Northland, North Kansas City, Missouri area. And it's funny, my wife's family knew him. We were sitting together at a Christmas party talking. He told me his story. And when he was 21 years old, he was getting into real estate. His dad was a developer. His mom was a very, very successful agent with RE/MAX. And sitting there talking to him, he said, I always knew I wanted to do real estate. He said, but I discovered very, very early on that I didn't want to go show houses and I didn't want to compete against, the young girls who are out here doing the residential thing. He said, so I needed to find a way to develop a product that brought people to me. And I started thinking about that. And I was like, it makes a lot of sense, So that's kind of what eased me into the development. And really it started out as, hey, I had some investors that I'd already worked with. And really my investors originally were the guys that owned the ground that I hunted on permission.
Oh, wow.
So I just said, hey, what if we buy this piece? Let's draw a line down the middle. Let's split it in half, and see what we can do. And it started out from that all the way till, right now we have 52 residential lots that we're putting in, single family subdivision stuff.
That scaled up pretty quickly. So when did you start that transition? What year was that roughly?
It's probably 2000, maybe 17. It's probably been going on for 5 years now.
Okay. Yeah. So how much has that changed in the last 5 years as well? Because obviously real estate's been really interesting and really fun to be in, to put it short.
Yeah, it's different. The housing markets in my area has been crazy for a long time. The 2008 to 2013 period, there weren't enough homes built. So development's always been good to us. Roll that in with just land prices appreciating at a rapid rate. It's been really good to me. But the one thing with doing what I do is when I go in and I buy a tract of ground and I split it up, the first time you do it, it's great. But the second property you buy, you're your own worst enemy, because now everybody around there has seen what you've done. So all you've done is raise the bar for your next purchase. Mm-hmm. So that's been a little difficult, on the large lot stuff, but the regular subdivision stuff has been really good. But I stay really local. Like you and I talked about, it's crazy it sounds. I live in a town of 6,000 people and I don't really go 10 minutes outside my town.
And that's huge. Do you get any flack for buying land and making subdivisions? Because there's some people that have varying opinions on this. People need a place to live, obviously, and some people want to have a nice little lot. But someone listening right now is like, this son of a gun, he's the guy that's, we're losing all the habitat and we're building more houses. So what do you say to that guy?
Well, so a couple answers to that. The first thing that people should know about me, first and foremost, is I am the biggest land nut that you'll ever meet, right? I appreciate land. I'm the guy that I have a hard time cutting down a tree. You know what I mean? Just because I appreciate land in the state that it's in, and that's what's always been my passion. The flip side of that is my goal in life is to someday own a full section. That's what I want, right? But my means to the end, unfortunately, is going to be buying other tracts and splitting it up to make enough income to be able to do that. So, it may be a little hypocritical, I guess, but that's what I know how to do. But with that being said, I've been in some city council meetings and county commissioner meetings where the neighbors show up in opposition to some of my projects. I don't get a lot of support ever. I'll tell you that. But I've heard lots of opinions from lots of neighbors who, they've lived here for 24 years and they moved to the country and they don't want guys like me to, the most opposition I got, we put in a 5-acre lot community. We put in, basically it's 10 5-acre lots. And the neighborhood across the street was a long cul-de-sac with 5-acre lots. So it's the same product, but these people have been there. That neighborhood got developed in 1978. And they just hated the fact that we were going to do it across the street. And it went from everything to traffic to the homes are going to be too nice and it's going to increase their property values and raise their tax basis to, you name it.
Yeah, I could imagine. I think people hate change no matter what that is. That's just human behavior. But I always have to ask, because that specific body of real estate does get a lot of flack, and people, yeah, I mean, and it is what it is. People are going to need places to live, and yeah, it's very interesting. So what have you learned throughout that process, though? Because I think that's a really interesting thing we haven't really talked about here at all, of finding an area that is worthy of potential development that can yield some of those higher dollar lots, buildable lots.
I would say the majority of your viewers probably have the goal of having, some sort of home site with a larger tract of ground. It may be 2 acres, maybe 5 acres, maybe 20 acres, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like where we're at, that doesn't just get created on its own. It takes somebody to go in and do that. So, I just learned that that's something that I could see myself and my family living on. And that's kind of why I ultimately understood that there was a demand for that product, which is why I started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get opposition, but out of everything I've ever sold, a 10-acre lot or a 20-acre lot, it's like always the easiest sell, because that's what people want. And especially if you're convenient enough to some other city or proximity to where people work and where they want to live anyways, then they're going to do it. So that's what I would say I learned. And second to that really segued my whole strategy in real estate into, being an owner on some of this stuff and investing what I know.
Yeah.
Because I went from a position where I was just pooling money from people that I knew and doing the project. And I mean, I didn't have any money at the time. So I was happy to just, like I explained to you, like, okay, we're going to buy this 80. I'm going to split it to 8 10-acre lots. And then I look at it like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a nice commission on the front side. Then I'm going to get 8 listings.
Yep.
And that was huge to me, and then I would do that. And I did that a handful of times. And then, man, I started looking at the pro forma that I'm presenting to the investors, and I look at the number at the bottom and I'm like, well, heck, I want to be that guy too. So then I just started investing into that stuff.
Built up to it. So what does your due diligence checklist look like when you're trying to analyze a deal and in a short form manner?
A lot of it's utility based. If it's a super rural piece, then making sure that there's water and power available. Everything's going to be septic. We're finally getting to the position now where we're actually getting high-speed internet south of town. So that's great too, obviously. Those are the main things. I've got a really good relationship with the local county planning office here where I'm at. So I can essentially pick up the phone and call, because there's some other things that come into it. If you put in so many lots, there's issues with driveway placement and number of accesses. And there's a whole list of things you kind of have to check through. But ultimately, just making sure that when you get it all done, that you're going to get the driveways that you're going to need, the utilities are intact, and you're not going to have some astronomical cost. With that being said, we're putting a water line here south of town that's I'm putting in 3,200 feet of 8-inch water line. But we were able to buy the piece, at a fair enough price that even buying that piece and putting in the water line and selling the lots, it still made sense financially.
Mm-hmm. How long are some of these lots sitting on the market when you list them?
Oh, I mean, the demand for that product in our area is so crazy.
Really?
I mean, but you're talking like a 10-acre lot. So number wise, we're selling 10-acre lots around here for say 200 to 250,000, which is a lot of money, right? But a typical residential lot where I'm at is 100,000. Mm-hmm. To get into a bigger type lot, it's not unusual to be 175. So people look at it and they go, okay, I'm gonna pay 175,000 to have this walkout lot in a neighborhood where I'm governed by the HOA, or I can just go buy 10 acres for 225, and then I can have my garden and I can have my space and I can shoot a gun or let my kids run around side by sides, whatever.
And what are kind of the houses that are going in there? Are those, what price of house are most of these being built on these lots?
I mean, everything's expensive. Everything's expensive around here. We can't build a new house for under 500 grand right now, just with the price of things. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, there's stuff that's, I don't know, it's got 2 commas. I don't know how to explain it. It's all preference, but it's not because they're limited. It's just what people want. It's kind of normally it's middle age or older people, and they just want to settle down there and be there.
40 to 55. Yeah.
And the price of everything right now, it's not just the house, it's that people put it at the house, and then they got to have the outbuilding, and so then you have a $500,000-$600,000 house and a $100,000 building and a $225,000 lot. Adds up in a hurry.
Yeah. Do you think that market's really stable where you're at?
I mean, I think so. I think that, well, right now that we don't have a lot of inventory, so that helps on that. Yeah, I think I told you before. I think that honestly, COVID, as crazy as this sounds, that COVID pushed a lot of people.
I agree.
The outskirts. and really probably added a lot of demand to that market. Now, like I said, we don't have any inventory. We don't have any existing product like that.
Just one last question about this. What is the industry there that's driving? Like, what are most of these people doing for work that are buying these types of parcels and building houses? Are they working at the university? Are they?
No, so I actually live in DeSoto, Kansas. I'm 15 minutes from Lawrence, 15 minutes from Overland Park, 15 minutes from Olathe, 15 minutes from Shawnee. So there's a lot of workforce around us. Our hometown, there's nothing around here. We're just a hub, DeSoto School District is highly, highly recognized. It's number 2 in the state. So a lot of people, come here just specifically for that. On the work front, I'm trying to think of the last people that I sold lots to. So the last project I did, one guy was a partner in a civil engineer firm. Another guy owned a local business in Olathe. Other guy's an engineer. Another guy was some sort of food rep. He had accounts nationally for restaurants and food. Other guy was an attorney, and the other guy did pharmaceutical sales. So
full spectrum there.
Full spectrum.
Yeah. So have you ever walked one of these farms and you're like, man, this comes across your desk, man, I need to walk this. This might be great for a project. And then you realize that, wait a minute, this might be better for deer hunting. Cause you mentioned you are a deer hunter at heart.
The piece that I just listed, I bought an 80-acre tract and we split it into 6 lots, 4 10s and 2 20s. I was going to keep one of the 20-acre lots for myself. That's my problem, honestly, is every piece I walk, I have a hard time finding something wrong with it. They're just all unique.
Yeah.
So I was going to keep that. And actually, one of the 10-acre lots that I sold while we were going through the replatting process, my son killed his second buck there. And then the next spring, he killed his first turkey there.
Oh, geez.
So there are some advantages to holding this stuff for a little while longer.
Right.
But we kept the 20-acre lot. We reserved it. We just didn't market it. My wife and I were going to build there. And then truthfully, we built the budget for our house. And we put it all together and got to the end and looked at the final number. And my wife said, no way. No way. So we're very frugal. We don't want a bunch of overhead. We don't want a bunch of expenses, and so we ended up selling it.
Yeah, well, that every piece I always walk, I always like, man, oh, you could do this would be awesome. Oh man, can you imagine this? It's hard to. I'm in the same boat where I fall in love with every piece of ground I walk on, which I could definitely see is maybe a disadvantage with what you're doing. But when did you end up buying your first recreational parcel too? Because I guess, have you bought a parcel like this is solely for recreation, this is solely for my enjoyment, and obviously it's a long-term hold, but have you purchased one of those yet?
I have, yeah. So actually it would have been last March. No, maybe it was last March. Where were we at? The March before. So March of 21. I actually closed on my very first piece. It's west of me here, Douglas County, 90-acre tract. And what's funny is I actually went to see that piece as an investment or development deal. It's very unusual where we're at, and the way this property was marketed. It was listed in the neighboring MLS, not in our MLS. So as a broker, I don't have access to the Sunflower MLS. So I didn't actually see it. So I found this track off of like LandWatch. It was marketed so poorly. Okay. One of the worst marketing posts I've ever seen. Okay. Like truthfully, right? And I got to looking at it, and there was only 3 pictures, and the pictures were like the agent was standing in the asphalt road, and he took one picture down the road and one picture down the road on the street side.
Yep.
And that's it. So, and in the pictures, it looked grass, like mowed grass. But then when you look at the details of it, it's like topography, hilly, like, terrain, whatever. And then it's like heavily wooded. And I'm over here scratching my head like this is like a puzzle for me. I'm like, you're saying that it's hilly and wooded, but yet the pictures are of asphalt and looks like a golf course grass. So I spent a bunch of time, finally I called the guy and he sent me an aerial map. And as soon as I saw an aerial map, I'm like, man, this is Dynamap. I draw a line down the middle of it. I'll split it. It's going to be perfect. So I hop in my truck and I drove. It's 30 minutes from my house. And I drove out there. And as soon as I pulled in, I stopped and I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I got out and I walked it and it just got better and better and better. And
so
when I got back to the truck,
like deer sign, or does potential, or what were you seeing that excited you so much?
My preferred terrain, or my preferred area that I like to hunt deer, and it's just because what I know is big timber, steep terrain. Like that's the stuff that's attractive to me. Most of my deer I've killed in the timber. So that's all I know. So when I pull up to this piece, just as an example, I pull up, it's 20-acre overgrown hay field with a bunch of reeds and Johnson grass, totally been neglected, right? It's got a creek that runs through it. But when you're looking at it, there's a huge bluff of timber, and it's as far as you can see, left and right, as far as you can see. And I pull up the aerial map and I start looking at it, and there's not a road for 1.25 miles behind it. Okay. And it's all timber. And then it connects to these big tracks, right? And there's ag on the tracks behind it. And I was like, man, this is looking good, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting point right there. I always get automatically more excited when here in Illinois, everything is basically 1 mile by 1 mile. Everything's 640s. And sometimes there's even a dirt road between those. Anytime I find a farm that skips that, and maybe it's a 2 by 1 mile or a 2 mile by 2 mile, always instantly excites me quite a bit more. And I've hunted a lot of those over the years, and they're substantially better because usually it's associated with larger tracks.
Yeah. And so the other thing that was really attractive on this piece is when I looked at it on Onyx, to the south of me is actually a county lake. So there's a huge, I don't know how big the lake is, honestly, maybe 35-acre lake, I would say. You can boat on it. And there's some area that you can even ski, a small area, but it's kind of like a fishing, kayak type lake. But they own a pretty big tract of ground, and it's got some habitat and stuff around it. So I'm looking at it going, okay, I got a little bit of a sanctuary to the south. To the north of me is big timber. Back behind me is big timber. So it just started lining up. It started checking boxes, and all of a sudden I went from developer and investor to like, man, maybe this is the one I actually keep. So then I got in the timber and I started walking it. And it was just like beat down trails. I mean, this is end of February or March.
Perfect time to walk it.
Oh, you know how it looks that time of year too. You can see a long ways. So you're looking through the timber and it's like big rub, big rub, big rub. And there's scrapes and it's just, man, everything about it. I just went in there and I walked it and I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
I called my wife and I said, on the way back, I called my wife. I said, you're not going to like this, but
so
buy this.
You guys mentioned you're frugal. So how hard of a pitch was that? I mean, how was that family decision made?
It's not. That's business decision. That's what I classify it as.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong, which brings up another point of how did you and your wife discuss that? Because I think this is a conversation a lot of people have where maybe in more scenarios, the husband's really excited to buy it and the wife's like, okay, how do we justify this crazy purchase to chase deer?
So I bought this through a business. Okay. So I have different LLCs set up. So I actually had money in another account from a deal that I had sold. Right. So it helps you to start the conversation when you're coming into it with profits from a previously successful.
Great point.
Right.
Yep.
My wife is very, very supportive of what I do. It's unbelievable. And I don't know how, because I'll give you a short story. The first piece I ever invested in myself, I saw a tract of ground, 1 acre lot here in DeSoto, and I saw it hit the MLS and I looked at it and I was like, that's too good to be true. And this is back when 1 acre lots are probably selling for 60 or 70,000 an acre as a home site. And this piece got listed for $17,500. Instantly, I call the agent. Agent answers the phone. He's 100 years old. And I'm like, hey, what's the situation with this? And he's like, oh, these people bought it in 1970. This guy lives south of town an hour. The agent, he's not familiar with the market, whatever. And I'm like, is there anything you know about it? He's like, we've talked to the city and I don't think it's buildable because it's 0.96 acres. And in order to have a septic, you have to have 1 acre. So I'm like, I'm going to go look at it. I'm interested, right? So I go on the way, I call my city building official here who I know. I call him and I go, what is the deal with this lot? He's like, I already told that guy it's buildable, but because of the size, you can't build some crazy mansion on it because you're not going to have enough room for lateral fields, whatever. He's like, but you can build a good sized house on it. And I said, what about it being, 0.96 or whatever it was? He goes, well, that's inside the right of way. We count to the center of the street. So it's a gross acre. So I don't know why he keeps saying that. He's like, but I had the conversation with him. He just didn't understand it. I go, okay, great. So I pull up, I look at it. This thing is overgrown, brushy. You can't walk 2 feet in it. The brush is at the road.
Yeah.
I pulled up on Onyx and I look at the topo and I start, envisioning it. And I go, okay, well, if I clear this, I put a house right here, I'll get a daylight basement. So I call the guy, I go, okay, I'll buy it. So I just wrote up a deal, whatever. He was like, okay. The next day I get it under contract. Now, keep in mind, this is a different time in my life. I literally had $25,000 in my checking account. I wrote an offer for $17,000 and I never asked my wife.
Okay.
Don't recommend this. Okay. So the next day I lived in Shawnee at this time, my first house there. my wife and I are coming to DeSoto for whatever reason. We're in the car and I drive her by, and she's not really paying attention, but she's never been in this neck of the woods. I pull in this little neighborhood and I pull up, and here's this overgrown, brushy lot with this rusted out sign from real estate brokers that's never heard of. And I go, what do you think of this piece? She looks up, she's on her phone. She looks up from her phone she looks at it, like disgusted, like shakes her head. She's like, what do you want with this piece of crap? And I looked at her and I go, that's our piece of crap. She thought I was kidding. She's like, no, seriously. And I'm like, no, honey, I'm serious. Oh, that was a bad dinner with the family that night. But I penciled it all out for her, and she was like, you know what am I going to say now?
Yeah.
We bought that piece for $17,000. I paid an excavator. I pushed all the trees. We burned it, cleaned it up. I overseeded it. Probably had $3,000 in it. So I was in it for 20 grand. And on the 12-month and 1 day, I listed it and we sold it for 75 grand.
Hard to argue that.
Man, that was the start of it all. And then I rolled that in another piece. And that's kind of what started my adventure in this investing process.
So what would you tell someone that's wanting to get started? What's one piece of advice people that are just getting started that need to hear?
As like a land agent?
No, as somebody who's wanting to buy, do exactly what you just did. They're just, looking on the internet just like everyone else.
Yeah. So I would say that, if you're really serious about buying something, then, most people already have an area, but if you don't, just kind of pick an area and just get so familiar with it that you need to be so familiar that when a listing hits the market, you can look at it and you can tell if it's overpriced, underpriced. Like, you need to be on it, and then, lean on guys like you and I and let us go negotiate on their behalf and try to get them a better deal, but they need to be able to identify, hey, this is a good deal right now. This is the piece. I feel like so many people get in the mode where they're just browse their phone, and you can scroll through 100 listings, but it's just, it's a failure to launch thing. People just, they look at it and then they overthink it. And then by the time they make up their mind, it's gone. And then it's like repeat. What do they call it? It's paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
That's what we call it. You just analyze it to the point where you do nothing.
I think that's plenty fair. And I think the biggest barrier, I think it's scary for most people, and it's the unknown. And also they hadn't done it before. So more than likely they don't trust their own gut instinct, because well, how do I know that this is how come, if this is such a good deal, why hasn't someone else bought it already? All these different things where, so what would you say to someone like that? Like, if there's all this money out there and people are scooping up all these deals, why is this one still available? What am I overlooking? Or sometimes deals just get overlooked for a long time.
Yeah. Well, so look, the 1 acre piece, I bought it when it was on the market for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It was on a hot sheet on my MLS. It hit my MLS and it hit my email, and I just happened to be looking at the time and I went and bought it. Flip side of that is my 90 acre piece that I bought. It was on the market 77 days before I bought it. And then I bought it for $30,000 less than what it was listed at. And I think it was listed at $60,000 less than what it was worth, just because it wasn't marketed correctly.
Yeah. I mean, when I see those pictures on online where they're the car iPhone, like they didn't even open their door, it's like you can see the rearview mirror in it. Oh, I love those.
They didn't even stop the car.
Yeah, those ones instantly. All right, where's this actually at? Look it up and start the due diligence process from there. That is really good advice, and I've helped people buy those parcels, and I think, and I've looked at those really hard myself, and I would agree that those often are not only the pictures are a poor reflection, but also probably the price.
Yeah, no, it is. It's If they can't market it correctly, and this may be overstepping saying this, but like if you've got somebody who doesn't see the value in giving you a great marketing package for your property, then obviously they don't understand the value of that property. Does that make sense? Like if they can't even put forth the effort or the expense on the real estate end to take great photos, to give a great explanation, to list all the true details of the property, then how do you expect them to price it adequately? They don't see it. If they saw the value in it, they would put more effort into it.
Yeah, but absolutely. I agree 100%. And I think that's what, as a buyer, that's what you should be looking for. Anything else as a buyer that you should be looking for? Obviously mismarketed properties, underpriced properties based off of your own analysis of becoming an expert in an area or talking with an agent that is an expert in the area. Is there any other stories or examples where you found like an oddball deal in a weird way?
No, just boots on the ground. I mean, my recommendation to a buyer would be just don't be afraid to go look. People line up at our model houses and subdivisions 100 deep every weekend. You know what I mean? So don't like think that it's unusual to go walk a piece of ground. If it's listed, you have a right to do it. So boots on the ground. And the other thing I would say is just buy something. If you have the ability to do it and it feels good and you like it that day, don't fall into the analysis by paralysis thing, or paralysis by analysis. Just don't, because you're never going to buy anything. And one of my mentors told me a long time ago, it's all the way from buying things all the way to hunting trips. He said, when he was 30 years old, he wanted to go on a bear hunting trip and it was $6,000, for a brown bear. He couldn't afford it. So he's going to wait till he's 32 years old. Well, guess what? Then it's $8,000. Well, then now he's got to wait till he's 38. At some point, you just have to draw a line in sand. You have to stop the cost. And the only way you can do that is just commit to it. It's never going to get any cheaper. Land's never going to get any cheaper. Not making any more of it, as they say, So find a piece, and if you like it and you're comfortable with it and you have the ability to do it, just buy it. Just tie it up. The only way to do it is you got to stop time, and that's the only way you can stop the price. Yeah. You have to put your name on it at that point in time.
Yeah. And I think there's so many people that say different things in terms of like where the market's at right now. I know a lot of people that are still buying great deals and great opportunities. And it's just, I don't know. It's like everyone wants to make some sort of excuse of like, the interest rates are too low, so prices are too high. Okay, well, now the interest rates are too high, and pick your battle. Like, it's never going to be absolutely perfect. And then even if let's say there is a dip, I still think people will be like, well, it's not at the bottom yet. I'm not going to buy it yet. It's like, what do you say to those folks, or what insight do you have on that?
I hear it every day like you, right? I mean, I could get on MLS right now and show you how many transactions closed in my area today. I mean, there's no way that every one of them was a bad deal.
100%.
So every one of those deals that closed, somebody thought it was a good deal, or they wouldn't have bought it.
And obviously appraised out everything else.
Right. So, I mean, there are deals that to some people, right, they just may not fit their what they're looking for. And that's okay. But it's the people that run around and talk about there's no good deals to be had. It's like there's deals happen every day.
Yeah. The abundance mindset. There's plenty for everyone. Go out there and get it. I mean, that's what a lot of successful people that I see, like, there's plenty of success for everyone out there.
There's opportunity everywhere. And honestly, the people that normally are the most vocal with there's no deals and everything's overpriced, those are either one of two people in my experience. One is somebody who doesn't own any, or two, somebody who may own land, but they bought it in 1973.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. So you ended up buying that parcel, and what was the experience like after buying that? Because it sounded like it was almost instantly you knew that you needed to buy that.
Yeah, the moment I walked in there, like I said, I walked in that piece. I never wanted to leave. Like, I'm not kidding. I could have stayed there all day. Like, and that's a lot of that's who I am. But the other thing is, like, this piece was so attractive to me that I was fascinated by it minute one, So we put it under contract, got a good deal on it, closed. One of the things that I did whenever I had it under contract is I put a trail camera out, dumped a couple bags of corn out just to see what was there, because I know nothing about the area. It looks great to me. I know that county wise, it's a good county, and proximity to other things I've hunted, it was good. But this specific track, I knew nothing about it. So I put a camera out there, left it out there for a couple of weeks, went and pulled it. There's a couple of good deer there, nothing crazy. There's a good wide buck that would have been good in a few years. A lot of the deer had shed, because this is the end of February, so there wasn't a lot to be seen. But there was one deer, and he looked like a mature deer, and he had big pedicles where broke off. He'd already shed. You see the red spots on there, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. It looks like an older age buck. Thought nothing about it. We close on it. We kind of put a little shed rally with me and a couple of my buddies. We go walk it. And the second time we walked it, first time I walked it by myself, it wasn't good conditions. It was sunny, and it's a lot of timber. It's hard to walk that stuff. So we got a good rainy day, and a couple of buddies and I went out there, and we walk upon this shed laying in the timber, and it's like this crazy. It's this.
Oh yeah, huge. And for anyone listening, it's a very characteristic, very characterful antler.
Yeah, it's double main beam. It's 88.5-inch shed. It's the biggest shed I've ever found. And I'm like, man, just the thought that thing was living, even if he was passing through.
That was the first time you walked it after you bought it?
That's the second time I walked it ever. The first time I found two little sheds in the grass. That was the second time I actually shed hunted it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I find that shed, and I'm like, man, just that something of that size walked through this property. It's unbelievable to me, So I was obviously excited about that. And that by seeing that kind of pushed me like, okay, time to get in gear. let's start some projects. Let's get in some plots. Let's get some stuff going. So I put in mineral and plots and did all the typical stuff, what I could. And man, like the end of May, I got a picture of a buck. This buck comes walking in, and they don't have a lot of growth yet, but he comes walking in there, and I look, and as soon as I see him, I go, oh my gosh, that's him. And you could tell that he had its double main beam starting. And I had pictures of that buck from May till about the middle of June, and then he disappeared. And I was bummed, because I'm like so excited, like I can't wait to see what this deer is going to turn into. And he just disappears. I'm like, well, whatever, it's good while it lasted, maybe I'll find his sheds again, and I got everything set up to hunt. I hung a couple stands, didn't really do anything too crazy on it. The 22nd of October, I got a picture of this deer in broad daylight. I went in and checked the camera, got a picture of this deer in broad daylight, hitting a scrape, a whole sequence of photos. And I remember looking at it and I was like, oh my gosh. Like I'd never seen anything like it. It's blown away. I'm calling all my buddies and I'm like, remember that shed that I found? I'm like, you're not going to believe this. And so we started speculating what he was going to be. And I ended up getting a lot of photos of him. And ultimately, I ended up killing that deer November 13th, the morning of November 13th. And I had him within 35 yards November 10th,
Ooh.
3 times in an afternoon hunt. And I couldn't get a shot. One time he was hitting a scrape behind a cedar tree. The other time I let him walk away and I grunted him back and he circled and he was trying to get downwind of me. My stand was blowing over a bluff and he was facing me at 32 yards. I wasn't going to take that shot. And then he circled back around and I snort wheezed at him and he stopped and he was on high alert. So I wasn't going to shoot. And then 3 days later, I killed him in the same spot that I had seen him before on the 10th.
Wow.
And
what was the emotions of killing that deer? That had to be so awesome to find the shed, think he disappears, he shows back up, he's ginormous, and then to seal the deal. I can't imagine.
Man, so honestly, my 2 of my goals in life, number 1 was to own, this is from a very young age. Number 1 was to own my own farm, right? Somewhere that I could hunt, I could pass on to my kids, because that's very, very important to me. Number 2 was I've always wanted to kill a 200-inch deer. Right. So I shot this buck. That deer ended up green scoring 220 inches. He's a hammer. I've showed you pictures of him. He's back here behind me, actually. Let's see. But while it was the best hunting experience of my life to date, right? Honestly, all of that got completely overshadowed by everything else that was going on in my life with my kid. Mm-hmm. It's exciting looking back. I've had a lot of time to reflect on it. It's great, but at the time it didn't have the effect that I thought it would on me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Truthfully, it almost felt like something was taken from me. Mm-hmm. So it was hard.
And so I think people are probably wondering, well, what exactly was going on? You just achieved 2 of your lifetime goals, and to feel a little bit empty when you do that, obviously something else going on was taking a lot of bandwidth of everything.
Yeah. So I have a son who's 7 now, Grant, and he's a hunting machine. I mean, the kid has grown up around it. We have pictures when he was 18 months old, standing next to deer that we've killed. He's been on blood trails since he could walk. His bedroom has always been decorated. He's got the very first deer I killed when I was 13. That mount has been in his room since we brought him home from the hospital. We found his first shed when he was 4 years old. Like all of these things, he's so involved and so invested in it. At 7, he's killed 3 bucks with a crossbow. 7 years old. He killed his first one when he was 4 years old.
Holy cow.
3 years old, he shot a little 120-inch 8-pointer with a crossbow. He's all about it. And it was the summer of 2021. He started getting bruises. And this gets hard to talk about sometimes. But so September 2nd, he ended up getting diagnosed with a bone marrow failure disorder. Sorry.
No, man, it's very real.
Yeah. So that changed us a lot. Changed my life a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many details you want me to go into, but basically we didn't know anything about it. It's a 1 in, a couple million disease that he got. And it's life-threatening, can be. the only cure, which isn't a guarantee, it's high probability, but no guarantee, is having a bone marrow transplant, which my son, thankfully, was able to receive, not without any drama, believe me, but April 19th, he received a bone marrow transplant from a complete stranger. All we know is that it's a 30-year-old woman from the United States. And that's all we know. And we won't have the ability to meet her or talk to her or anything until 12 months after transplant. We've learned a lot through this process. Part of Grant's journey was that we had another donor lined up, and it was a guy from the UK, and he was a perfect match. And finding a perfect match is not easy. And part of the criteria for being a bone marrow donor, really what they're looking for is they want, in a perfect world, a male under the age of 40. That's the perfect match. And it goes off of HLA, and it's a gene type thing. And then they want that. And then they, if they can, then it's similar blood type or exact blood type. They have a whole list of criteria, but we had a perfect match, and we rolled into that very, very fortunate. We were very, very happy. And Grant, he started his transplant process 3 times. And the first time we got admitted, the donor got COVID. So we took a little 2-week pause. Second time he went in, he started chemo, because part of the transplant process, he has to go through a chemo regimen to kill all of your bone marrow. There's conditions where if you put new bone marrow in, and if you don't kill the existing, then there's a conflict, and then it causes rejection. So we got in, he started his chemo regimen, and we got a call saying that we thought the donor had tested positive for COVID again, after he'd already had chemo for 1 day. This has never been done. So then our team said, we don't really know what to do. Let's think about this. They retested him the next day, and he tested negative. But at that point, now we had broken the regimen, and the regimen for this treatment is very, very strict. So we said, hey, let's harvest the donor. In the UK, we're going to fly the cells over here. We're going to analyze them to make sure there's enough quantity of cells to perform the transplant, because there's no data supporting what does COVID do to bone marrow. This is all new to everybody, right? So they harvested him, they flew it over, they analyzed the cells. And I guess I should say at this point, we're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Because
you guys relocated for treatment, right?
Yeah. So we're in Milwaukee. I shot that buck November 13th. We left November 15th. Me, my wife, and my son. We left our other son behind with her parents, and we went to Milwaukee because we thought that was the best team for what we were trying to do. So we broke the regimen. We didn't really know. We get the cells, they analyze them. Quantity looks great. We start chemo again to go through the process. We get 2 days into chemo this time. So now my son's had a total of 5 different chemo drugs, right? And our doctor comes in one night in a complete panic and says, we just got an email from the bone marrow database telling us there's indications that our donor could be HIV positive. And that was at 6:00 at night. And by the end of that night, we had the whole team working on it. By the end of that night, we found out that he was HIV positive. We had